Somewhere in Wyoming, in open sagebrush country under an endless sky, an animal is lying still on the ground. About the size of a young deer, it has pale and white-toned fur, with a few black markings on its face. This small animal is the second fastest land animal in the world. It can run at around 55 miles an hour. Only the African cheetah can beat it, and it does not manage this for just a few seconds. It can hold over 45 miles an hour for half a mile at a time. The strange part is that the predators hunting it today cannot even come close to that speed. Coyotes, for example, can run at around 40 miles an hour. Wolves are usually slower still, which leaves us with a very odd question. This animal seems to have been built to escape something that no longer exists. This fast animal is called the pronghorn. In terms of American natural history, its speed looks like a real puzzle, because evolution never hands out features for free. It does not give an animal something as valuable as speed and turn it into the second fastest land animal on Earth by accident. Something must have been chasing it. In this documentary, we are going to look for the answer to that question. We will examine the cats that once ran these same lands faster than it did and are no longer alive. We will visit a cave in the Bighorn Mountains that pulled animals into itself for many thousands of years, and we will get into a mystery that is still an active scientific argument today. If you also enjoy content like this, and like discovering the animals hidden in the places where you live, you can take a second and subscribe to the channel. Let's find out why the pronghorn is so fast. The pronghorn is one of the most misunderstood animals in North America, starting with its name. People call it the American antelope, but it is not an antelope. It is not closely related to the antelopes of Africa and Asia at all. The pronghorn is the last surviving member of an entirely American family called the antilocaprids, a lineage that has been running across this continent for something like 19 million years. There were once dozens of species in that family, some with strange forked horns, some with 4 horns, all of them built on the same basic plan: light, long-legged, and fast. Every one of them is gone except this one. When you watch a pronghorn move across a field in Wyoming or Montana, you are watching the final representative of an ancient American dynasty. That fact alone should give us pause. 19 million years is an enormous span, far longer than the history of the human family, longer than the existence of most of the animals we think of as ancient. Through all of it, this lineage was doing essentially one thing: refining the business of running across open ground in America. The pronghorn is not a newcomer that happened to get quick. It is the polished end product of an experiment that has been running since long before the Ice Age began. And what it does best is run. The numbers are worth sitting with. A pronghorn can reach around 55 miles an hour, with some observers reporting bursts closer to 60. That places it second only to the African cheetah among all land animals. But raw top speed is not even the most impressive thing about it. The cheetah is a sprinter, and a short one. A cheetah's average chase covers less than 200 meters, and after 20 or 30 seconds the animal is overheating and finished. The pronghorn is a different machine entirely. It can hold 55 miles an hour for something like half a mile, and cruise at 45 for distances that would leave a cheetah collapsed in the grass. In terms of sustained high-speed running, the pronghorn may be the finest endurance runner on the planet. It is worth converting that into something you can picture. 55 miles an hour is highway speed. If a pronghorn came up alongside your car on an interstate, it would keep pace for a while, and it would do it across broken sagebrush rather than smooth asphalt. And it would not be finished afterwards. Where a cheetah would be lying in the grass with its sides heaving, the pronghorn would still be moving. It is not simply the second fastest animal on Earth. In terms of holding real speed over real distance, it may be the best there has ever been. Its whole body is engineered for that one purpose. Look closely and it is a study in efficiency. The legs are long and slender, with the heavy muscle concentrated up near the body and the lower limbs light and whipped thin, so that the animal wastes almost no energy swinging them. The tendons in those legs work like springs, storing energy as the hoof strikes and releasing it into the next stride. The hooves themselves are cushioned to absorb the shock of running hard over rough ground. The bones are light. There is almost nothing on this animal that is not there to make it move. Even the parts that seem incidental serve the same end. Pronghorn have enormous eyes for their size, set high and wide on the skull, giving them a field of vision that sweeps almost the entire horizon at once. Some accounts credit them with the ability to pick out movement several miles away. For an animal whose survival depends on beginning its run early, vision is as important as leg muscle. Seeing the threat sooner means starting sooner, and starting sooner means never being caught at all. Inside, the engineering is even more extreme. A pronghorn has an oversized windpipe, an oversized heart, and lungs far larger than an animal of its size should need, allowing it to take in and process oxygen at a rate that few mammals can match. Its blood is unusually rich in the cells that carry that oxygen to the muscles. Where a cheetah's sprint is essentially anaerobic, a violent burst that runs the animal into oxygen debt within seconds, the pronghorn is aerobic. It runs the way a marathon athlete runs, only at highway speed. Every part of it has been tuned, over millions of years, toward one outcome: not being caught. Now hold that against the world it actually lives in. Go out onto the plains of Wyoming today and list the predators. There are coyotes, which manage around 40 miles an hour in a short burst. There are wolves in a few places, slower than that over open ground. There are mountain lions, which are ambush hunters, explosive over short distances but hopeless in a long chase. There are golden eagles, which take fawns, and that is essentially the roster. An adult pronghorn at full speed is not merely faster than everything hunting it. It is faster by an enormous, almost absurd margin. It could outrun every predator on the continent while barely working. Compare that with the situation in Africa, where the cheetah and the gazelle are locked into a genuinely close contest. A cheetah is fast enough to catch a gazelle sometimes, and the gazelle is fast enough to escape sometimes. The margin between them is narrow, which is exactly what you expect from two animals that have been sharpening each other for a long time. In North America, there is no such contest. The gap between pronghorn and predator is not a margin. It is a gulf, and gulfs like that are not what evolution normally produces. This is what makes biologists uneasy, because evolution does not build luxury. Every adaptation has a cost, and speed is one of the most expensive things an animal can buy. Those long, thin legs snap more easily. That enormous heart and those oversized lungs consume resources to build and maintain. A body optimized for running is a body compromised in other ways, less able to fight, less able to hide, less able to survive on poor food. Natural selection is relentlessly practical. It does not maintain a capacity that is not being used. If the pronghorn keeps paying for 55 miles an hour, generation after generation, something must be collecting. Or, at the very least, something used to be. Adaptations do not vanish the moment they stop being useful. They fade slowly, over long stretches of time, as the cost of maintaining them accumulates without any corresponding benefit. A feature that is no longer needed can persist for thousands of years simply because there has not yet been enough pressure to remove it. That opens up a possibility that is genuinely unsettling when you think about it. That what you are watching in a modern pronghorn is not an adaptation to the present at all, but a fossil behavior, a piece of the Pleistocene still running around in the daylight. So the question sharpens into something quite precise. It is not simply why is the pronghorn fast? Plenty of prey animals are fast. The question is why is the pronghorn this fast, this far beyond what its current world demands? And the most straightforward explanation is also the most haunting one, that the pronghorn is not adapted to the world it lives in now. It is adapted to a world that ended, and if that is true, then a pronghorn is not merely an animal. It is a piece of evidence, walking around in the open, testifying to conditions that no human being has ever witnessed. You do not need a fossil to see the Pleistocene. You need a pair of binoculars and a drive through Wyoming in the summer. Somewhere in its recent past, there was a predator that made this level of speed necessary, and that predator is gone. Which leads us to a cat that once ran these same plains, and to one of the strangest cases of mistaken identity in American paleontology. For most of the 20th century, the answer seemed to have a name. Scientists working on Ice Age fossils from the American West kept finding the bones of a cat that looked wrong for this continent. It was slender where American cats are heavy. Its legs were too long. Its face was shortened and its nasal opening was strikingly large. Everything about it looked like an animal built to run, and to anyone familiar with the big cats of the Old World, it looked like one animal in particular. It looked like a cheetah, and so it was named as one, Miracinonyx, from the Latin for wonderful joined to the scientific name of the cheetah itself. The wonderful cheetah, the American cheetah. Names in science are supposed to be neutral labels, but they are never really neutral. Once an animal is called the American cheetah, everything about it is read through that lens. Illustrations show it spotted. Descriptions assume it sprinted. The name does the thinking for you. And for the better part of a century, that is more or less what happened with this cat. It is easy to see why. Set a Miracinonyx skeleton beside a modern cheetah skeleton and the resemblance is genuinely striking. The proportions match. The lightened build matches. The enlarged nasal opening, which in a living cheetah allows it to pull in enough air during a sprint that would suffocate another cat, is there in the fossil too. There were even differences in the claws that pointed the same direction. In the later of the two known species, the claws had become only partially retractable, so that they stayed permanently a little exposed. In a cheetah, this same feature functions like the spikes on a running shoe, biting into the ground for grip at speed. Finding it in an American fossil looked like confirmation, and the location fit perfectly too. These fossils were coming out of the open country of the American West, exactly the kind of environment where a cheetah-like hunter would make sense. A slender, long-legged, sprint-adapted cat on wide grasslands full of fast grazing animals is not a puzzle. It is almost a prediction. Everything lined up, and for a long time nobody had any reason to look harder. For decades then the picture seemed settled. America had cheetahs. They ran the western plains and they hunted the fastest thing out there. And then in 2005, a team of researchers led by Ross Barnett did something that changed the animal completely. They recovered genetic material from a Miracinonyx specimen and read it. This is the point where the account of this animal splits in two. The version people had been telling for decades, and the version the evidence actually supports. Ancient DNA has done this repeatedly across paleontology, and it is one of the most valuable tools the field has ever acquired, precisely because bones can mislead. Shape is the product of function, and function can be arrived at from many different starting points. Genes record ancestry directly, and ancestry does not care what an animal looks like. The result was not what anyone had drawn on the wall. Miracinonyx was not a cheetah. It was not closely related to the cheetah at all. Its nearest living relative by a wide margin is the cougar, the mountain lion still prowling the American West today. After that comes the jaguarundi, a small, slinky cat of Mexico and Central America. The genetic clock suggested that Miracinonyx and the cougar split from a shared ancestor somewhere around 3 million years ago. Everything cheetah-like about this animal, the long legs, the light frame, the shortened face, the wide nasal opening, the semi-retractable claws, had been arrived at independently. The American cheetah was, in the end, a mountain lion's cousin that had been reshaped into the form of something else entirely. This is convergent evolution, and it is one of the most powerful patterns in biology. When two unrelated lineages are handed the same problem in the same kind of environment, they very often arrive at the same solution. Around 2.5 to 3 million years ago, the world's climate was shifting, and open grasslands were spreading across both the Old World and North America. On those grasslands appeared fast, open country grazers. And on both continents, Cats descended from cougar-like ancestors were reshaped by the same pressure into the same tool, a lightweight, long-limbed, high-speed pursuit hunter. In Africa and Eurasia, that experiment produced the cheetah. In North America, it produced Miracinonyx. Two different families, the same blueprint, drawn up independently on opposite sides of the world. Once you start looking for this pattern, you see it everywhere in the history of life. Dolphins and extinct marine reptiles arrived at nearly the same body because water imposes the same demands on anything large that swims fast. Birds, bats, and insects each invented flight separately. Convergence happens because the number of workable solutions to a physical problem is small, and evolution, given enough time and the same pressure, will find them again and again. The American cheetah is one of the cleanest mammalian examples we have. There were actually two species in the American line, and the difference between them is instructive. The earlier one, Miracinonyx inexpectatus, was closer to a cougar in its proportions. Its claws were fully retractable, and its build suggests it was still a capable climber, an animal that could take to the rocks and the trees. The later species, Miracinonyx trumani, is the one that looks most like a cheetah. Its limbs are longer and more slender, its claws only partly retractable, its whole frame pushed further toward running and further from climbing. What you are seeing across those two species is a lineage moving, over hundreds of thousands of years, out of the broken country and onto the open plain. That transition is a commitment, and it is worth understanding how serious a commitment it is. A cat that can climb has an escape route, a place to cache food, a refuge from larger predators, and a second way of hunting. Giving that up in exchange for running speed means betting everything on a single strategy in a single kind of habitat. It is the sort of bet that pays extremely well while conditions hold, and catastrophically badly when they change. Miracinonyx trumani is therefore the animal at the center of this account, and it survived remarkably late. It was still running the steppes and prairies of western North America around 13,000 years ago, which places it firmly in the world of the first Americans and alongside the mammoths, the dire wolves, and the American lion. It was, by every measure of the skeleton, a running specialist, and it is worth pausing on how briefly we missed it. 13,000 years sounds like a lot until you set it against the age of the Earth, at which point it collapses into nothing. Human beings were already on this continent, already making tools, already telling each other things around fires, while this cat was hunting the western plains. Whatever the first Americans knew about Miracinonyx, and they must have known something, is lost. But they shared a landscape with it, and that is not ancient history. That is very nearly the present. But specialist at what exactly and how fast are questions that turn out to be much harder than they look, as we will see. Set aside the argument about names for a moment and simply look at the animal. Miracinonyx trumani stood roughly the size of a modern cougar, perhaps a shade larger, but the mass was distributed very differently. Where a cougar is compact and heavily muscled, built to leap onto prey and wrestle it down, Miracinonyx was stretched out and light. Longer in the leg, narrower in the body, with the deep chest of an animal that needed lung capacity. If a cougar is built like a wrestler, this cat was built like a middle-distance runner. That distinction matters more than it might seem, because in the cat world it is close to unique. Cats are, almost without exception, ambush animals. Their bodies are compromises built around the moment of contact. Powerful forelimbs, flexible shoulders, retractable claws, a bite designed to be delivered at close quarters after a short, violent approach. A cat that has begun trading those things away for locomotion is a cat that has left the family strategy behind. The legs are the first thing anyone notices. They are proportionally long, and the lower segments in particular are lengthened, which is a classic signature of a running animal. Lengthening the lower leg increases the distance covered with each stride without adding much weight to the part of the limb that has to be swung back and forth thousands of times. Nearly every fast-running mammal on Earth converges on this same solution, from horses to greyhounds to the pronghorn itself. Finding it in a cat is unusual because most cats are not built to chase. Most cats are built to sneak, and there is a good reason for that. Chasing is expensive and unreliable. A failed sprint costs an enormous amount of energy and returns nothing, which is why cheetahs abort so many hunts and why they must succeed often enough to justify the cost. Stalking, by contrast, lets a predator invest very little until the odds are good. For most cats in most habitats, patience is simply a better business model than speed. It takes a very particular kind of landscape, one where cover is scarce and prey is fast, to make the running gamble worth taking. That is worth dwelling on. Of all the cats alive today, only one is a genuine pursuit predator. Lions, tigers, leopards, jaguars, cougars, lynxes, all of them are fundamentally ambush hunters. They creep as close as they possibly can, then explode over a short distance and grapple their prey down. If the prey detects them early, the hunt is usually abandoned. The cheetah alone abandoned that strategy for open ground and sustained speed. So when the fossil record produces a second cat with a running body on a different continent, it is a genuinely remarkable thing. Then there is the skull. The face of Miracinonyx is shortened compared with a cougar, and the nasal opening is enlarged. This is not decoration. An animal running at extreme speed has an enormous oxygen problem. Muscles burn through it faster than the body can supply, and the airway becomes a bottleneck. Widening the nasal passage is a direct engineering response, and the modern cheetah has exactly the same feature, along with enlarged sinuses. Two unrelated cats on two continents, both solving the same breathing problem the same way. It is a detail that carries real weight, because a nasal opening is not the sort of thing that changes casually. Skull architecture is conservative, tightly constrained by the need to house teeth, eyes, jaw muscles, and brain. When a lineage reshapes the front of its face to move more air, the pressure driving that change must have been substantial and sustained. The skull is telling us that whatever this animal was doing, it involved running hard enough that breathing became the limiting factor. The claws tell their own part of this. In almost all cats, the claws retract fully into sheaths, kept sharp and out of the way until the moment they are needed to grip prey. In Miracinonyx trumani, that system is relaxed, and the claws sit permanently somewhat exposed. There is a trade-off buried in that. Exposed claws blunt against the ground, which costs an ambush hunter its most important weapon. But they also dig into the earth on every stride, giving traction in a fast turn. When an animal gives up sharp claws for grip, it is telling you what it valued most. And notice that the two known species sit at different points along that trade. The earlier one kept its claws fully retractable and kept its ability to climb. The later one gave both up. That is not a snapshot, but a direction of travel, a lineage steadily surrendering its versatility in exchange for performance in one dimension. Fossils rarely let us watch a decision being made across time. Here we can see one being made. Where did it live? The fossils cluster in the American West, on the plains and steppe country, though the range reached considerably further, with material turning up across a wide swathe of the continent. The timing matters too. Miracinonyx appears in the record as the older, more wooded savannas of the late Pliocene were giving way to drier, more open grassland, roughly 2.5 million years ago. The cat arrives with the grassland. That is not a coincidence. Open country is the arena where speed pays, and the appearance of a running cat at exactly the moment the running arena opens up is a very strong hint about what was happening. The same shift was reshaping animals everywhere. Grasslands are a harsh kind of habitat for both hunter and hunted. There is nowhere to hide, sightlines run for miles, and encounters begin at long range with both animals fully aware of each other. In that setting, the hunt becomes a straightforward physical contest, and everything that is not speed becomes secondary. Grass, in a sense, invented the sprint. It is one of the underappreciated turning points in the history of life on land. When grasses spread across the world's drying interiors, they did not simply change what herbivores ate. They rebuilt the physics of predation. Cover disappeared. Distances opened. Encounters that had been decided in a few meters of dense vegetation were now decided over hundreds of meters of open ground, and whole lineages of animals were reshaped in response. The pronghorn and Miracinonyx are two products of that single change, pushed in opposite directions by the same force. Researchers have also looked inside the skull. Modern imaging allows paleontologists to reconstruct the shape of the brain from the space it occupied, and studies of Miracinonyx endocasts have examined how this cat's brain compared with cougars and with the living cheetah, looking at the regions involved in vision, movement, and coordination. This is the frontier of the work, and it is one of several fronts on which our picture of this animal is still actively being built. So the skeleton makes a coherent case. This was a cat that had traded the classic feline toolkit of stealth and grappling for something closer to pursuit. It arrived as the grasslands arrived. It shared those grasslands with a fast-running, open-country grazer whose descendants are still the fastest animals on the continent. It is very hard to look at all of that and not draw the obvious line between them. And for a long time, that is exactly what people did. In 1979, a paper appeared with a title that made the claim directly: the cheetah Native American. Its argument was simple and it was elegant. The pronghorn is far faster than any living North American predator requires. Miracinonyx was a fast-running cat that shared the pronghorn's range and its era. Therefore, the pronghorn's speed is an adaptation to a predator that is no longer here. The pronghorn in this reading is running from a ghost. The phrase stuck, and it deserved to. Scientific ideas usually spread on the strength of their evidence, but occasionally one spreads on the strength of its imagery, and this is one of those. Everyone who hears it understands it instantly, and everyone who hears it remembers it. It is difficult to overstate how satisfying this idea is. It takes a puzzle you can see in a living animal on a modern American afternoon and resolves it with something that vanished at the end of the Ice Age. It makes the deep past visible in the present, and it fits into a broader concept that biologists find genuinely useful: the ecological anachronism. The idea is that living species can carry adaptations shaped by relationships that no longer exist, features that make no sense against the world as it is, and perfect sense against the world as it was. The concept is powerful because it reframes what a living species actually is. We tend to assume that animals are well matched to their surroundings, that what we observe is what natural selection currently endorses. Anachronisms puncture that assumption. They show that the living world is partly a museum, carrying forward arrangements made for conditions that expired, and that some of what we see around us is a response to a landscape nobody alive has ever walked through. There are other examples, and they are strange in the same way. Several American trees produce fruit that seems designed to be eaten and dispersed by something large, and yet nothing alive today eats them in useful quantity. The Osage orange drops heavy green fruit that mostly rots where it falls. The avocado has a seed too big for any living American animal to swallow and carry. The usual explanation is that these plants co-evolved with the great vanished herbivores, the ground sloths, the mammoths, the mastodons, and that when those animals disappeared, the plants were left holding a contract with a partner who no longer exists. They are still producing fruit for ghosts. There is a particular sadness in those cases that is worth noticing. A tree cannot know that its partner is gone. It carries on manufacturing an expensive fruit, season after season, for an animal that stopped existing before human history began. The relationship is broken, but only one side is aware of it, and it will take a great deal of time for the tree's biology to catch up with the loss. Extinction does not only remove animals, it leaves behind orphaned adaptations in the species that survive. The pronghorn version of this idea is the most vivid of all because it is not a passive feature like a seed. It is a behavior you can watch. Go out onto the sagebrush and a pronghorn will run, and when it runs, it deploys a capacity that nothing present can justify. It is not fleeing a coyote at coyote speed. It is running as though something far more dangerous is behind it. In this telling, every time a pronghorn accelerates across a Wyoming plain, it is reenacting a chase that stopped happening around 12 or 13,000 years ago. You can construct the scene fairly precisely, and it is worth doing. Late Pleistocene Western North America, open-steppe grassland, cold and dry. Herds of pronghorn along with horses, camels, and bison spread across the plain. A Miracinonyx moves through the low cover using what little there is, closing the distance as far as it can before it is seen. Then the herd detects it, and the chase begins in the open at speeds that nothing in modern North America can reproduce. The cat is committed. It has traded away its ability to hide and to grapple for a body that can run. If it cannot close the gap in the first stretch, it goes hungry. And that is what makes the arms race idea so compelling here. Both animals face an absolute, unforgiving test with no room for a partial result. A pronghorn that is slightly too slow does not get a second chance to pass on its genes. A cat that is slightly too slow does not eat. There is no negotiation and no gradual outcome. Selection of that kind, applied over hundreds of thousands of years, can push both parties to physical extremes that look almost unreasonable from the outside. Over enough generations, that dynamic produces exactly what we see. The slower pronghorn are removed, the faster ones breed. The cat, in turn, is under pressure to be faster still. This is the classic evolutionary arms race, the same process that sharpened the cheetah and the gazelle on the other side of the world, running here on American grass. There is a symmetry to it that people find satisfying, and part of the appeal is that it makes the American plains feel like the Serengeti. We are used to thinking of the great predator-prey spectacles as belonging elsewhere, to Africa, to somewhere exotic. This idea relocates that drama to Wyoming and Montana and Colorado, to ordinary American country that people drive through without a second thought. It says that this was here too, and not very long ago. And for a channel about the animals that lived where you live, that is the heart of the matter. The high-speed chase, the specialist cat, the desperate escape, all of the imagery we file under somewhere far away, happened on American ground. It happened on land that is now ranch and highway and small town. The difference between the Serengeti and the American West is not that one had a great predator drama and the other did not. It is that one still has it, and the other lost it recently enough that the survivors are still carrying the equipment. And when one runner in that race disappears, the other is left with a body shaped by a competition that has ended. There is a genuine poignancy in the picture, and it is part of why the idea spread so far beyond science. It suggests that an animal can carry its own history in its muscles, that the past is not entirely gone but encoded in the living present, that on the plains of the American West something is still running from a cat that has been dead for 120 centuries. It is a wonderful account. But a wonderful account is not the same thing as a demonstrated one, and to test it, scientists needed the cat itself. Which brings us to a hole in the ground in northern Wyoming. In the Bighorn Mountains of northern Wyoming, there is an opening in the ground roughly 12 feet by 15 feet across. From a short distance away, it is close to invisible, a dark gap in pale rock at the base of a slope, easy to miss and easier still to walk into. Beneath that opening, the ground falls away for around 80 feet, straight down into darkness. It is called Natural Trap Cave, and the name is exactly accurate. Very few fossil sites are quite so honestly named. This is not a place where animals were gradually buried by sediment or preserved by a slow-moving river. It is a place that killed things repeatedly for a very long time and kept what it killed. For tens of thousands of years, this hole did one thing with terrible efficiency. Animals moving across the slope, particularly animals moving fast, went into it and did not come out. There is no gradual approach, no visible warning at speed. A running animal simply arrives at the edge and falls. And because the surrounding country funnels movement toward that area, the cave collected a steady toll across the entire late Ice Age. Everything that fell in landed at the bottom, and the bones piled up on top of each other, layer after layer, century after century. The layering itself is valuable, because material accumulated continuously. The deposit records not a single moment but a long stretch of time, with older animals lying beneath younger ones. That allows researchers to track how the local fauna changed across the late Ice Age, watching species appear and disappear through the sequence. Very few sites give that kind of continuous record, and fewer still give it with this level of preservation. The conditions down there turned out to be extraordinary. The cave is deep, dark, and cold, with a stable temperature far below the surface heat of a Wyoming summer. That cold has done something rare in paleontology. It has preserved not just the shape of the bones, but the organic material inside them. Ancient genetic material survives in natural trap cave in a way it usually does not survive at more temperate sites. When researchers began working there seriously in the 1970s, they realized they had access not just to skeletons, but to chemistry and to DNA. That distinction is the difference between describing an animal and interrogating it. From a skeleton, you can infer how something moved and guess at what it ate. From preserved collagen and genetic material, you can test those inferences directly, and sometimes overturn them. Natural trap cave, by virtue of being cold, deep, and dark, has turned out to be one of the most informative Ice Age sites on the continent, and much of what is now known about Miracinonyx exists because of that accident of geology. The scale of what came out is difficult to imagine. Tens of thousands of specimens have been recovered from the cave, representing an enormous cross-section of Ice Age life in the American West. Horses, bison, wolves, bears, mammoths, and among them, the cats. Natural Trap Cave has produced the best and most numerous fossils of Miracinonyx found anywhere. Much of what we know about the anatomy of this animal comes from individuals that ran across that slope, hit the gap, and fell 80 feet into the dark. Excavation continues to this day, and in recent seasons researchers have recovered material as fine as a complete articulated hand of the animal, every bone of the palm still in position. There is a grim irony in this that is worth acknowledging. The very thing that makes Miracinonyx interesting, its speed, is probably part of why we have such good fossils of it. A slow, careful animal picks its way across a slope and notices a hole. A running animal does not get the chance. The cave preferentially collected the fast, and it preserved them beautifully. It is also a reminder of how much chance is involved in what we know about the past. Our picture of Ice Age America is not a balanced sample of what lived here. It is assembled from whatever happened to end up in tar pits, sinkholes, caves, and riverbeds, filtered by the particular ways those places catch and keep bodies. A great deal has left no trace at all. What we call the fossil record is really a record of the specific accidents that preserve things, which is worth keeping in mind whenever anyone, including me, tells you confidently what an extinct animal did. Every claim about Miracinonyx rests on a small number of individuals that happen to die in places that happen to keep them. The animal lived across a continent for hundreds of thousands of years, and we are reading it from a handful of skeletons, most of them from one hole in Wyoming. That is not a reason to distrust the science. It is a reason to hold it lightly and stay interested in what comes next. And in this case, there genuinely is a next. Excavation at Natural Trap Cave is ongoing. New specimens are still emerging, and researchers are actively working on the diet and biology of this cat right now, with results not yet published. The picture of Miracinonyx that exists in 10 years may differ substantially from the one that exists today. This is not a closed case being recited. It is an open investigation, and we are watching it in progress. And this is where the Pronghorn question could finally be tested rather than merely argued. Bones from Natural Trap Cave retain enough organic material that researchers can perform isotopic analysis on the collagen inside them. The chemistry of what an animal ate leaves a signature in its tissues, and predators carry the signature of their prey. By comparing the isotopic values in Miracinonyx bones against the values from the herbivores that lived alongside them, it became possible to ask directly, for the first time, whether this cat was actually eating pronghorn. The answer, published in recent years, was yes, and also not only. Pronghorn were on the menu. The predator-prey relationship at the heart of the whole idea was real and is now supported by direct chemical evidence rather than inference from body shape. But the same work indicated that pronghorn were not the exclusive food of Miracinonyx. Researchers working on the diet of this animal today describe a cat that appears to have eaten different things in different environments, adjusting to what was available rather than locking onto a single target species. That nuance matters more than it might appear. A specialist predator, one that lives or dies on catching a single fast prey animal, is exactly the kind of relentless pressure that could drive an arms race to the extreme. A flexible generalist that takes pronghorn when it can and other animals when it cannot is a different proposition. It still eats pronghorn. It still selects against the slow ones, but the evolutionary force it applies is softer. The cave had confirmed the relationship and complicated it in the same breath. This is what real evidence usually does. Popular accounts of science tend to move from ignorance to certainty in a clean line, but actual investigation is rarely so obliging. It answers the question you ask, and then hands you 3 new ones, and the picture gets richer and less comfortable at the same time. And that was only the beginning of the complications. Science is at its most interesting when a beloved explanation meets evidence that does not quite fit, and over the last few years, that is exactly what has happened here. The ghost predator account is not dead, but it is no longer the tidy, settled thing it appeared to be, and the honest position today is considerably more uncertain than the version you will find in most popular retellings. I want to be clear about why this matters, because it would be easy to present the ghost predator idea as settled fact and move on. Most channels do. But an explanation that everyone finds beautiful deserves more scrutiny than one nobody cares about, not less, precisely because its appeal can carry it past the point the evidence supports. The first serious challenge came from an unexpected part of the body, the elbow. A team of researchers based at the University of Malaga examined a Miracinonyx trumani skeleton recovered from a chasm in Wisconsin and focused on the joint where the upper arm meets the forearm. This is a revealing piece of anatomy in a predator, because it encodes what the animal did with its front limbs. A cat that grapples prey needs rotational freedom in the forearm, the ability to turn and grip. A cat that runs flat out sacrifices that freedom for stability, because a limb that can twist is a limb that can be injured at speed. The living cheetah sits far toward the running end of that spectrum, having given up much of its grappling capacity for pure locomotion. This is one of the hidden costs of the cheetah's specialization, and it shapes the animal's whole life. A cheetah's forelimbs are so committed to running that it struggles to hold large or powerful prey, which is why it targets smaller antelope, and why it loses so many kills to larger predators that simply take them. Speed came at the price of strength. Any cat moving in the cheetah direction pays some version of that bill, and the elbow is where the payment shows up. When the team measured Miracinonyx, it did not sit where the cheetah sits. The end of the upper arm bone nearest the elbow was oval and elongated in a way that separated the forearm bones, indicating that this cat retained a real ability to manipulate and hold prey with its front limbs, in the manner of a cougar. Their conclusion was direct. Miracinonyx trumani was not as specialized as the living cheetah for a hunting style based on flat-out running, and its physiology would have prevented it from reaching cheetah-like speeds. It was, in their words, not such a sprinting predator. They proposed instead that it deployed a predatory behavior with no modern equivalent at all, something between the ambush of a cougar and the pursuit of a cheetah, a strategy that no living cat performs. That is an uncomfortable conclusion to work with, and it is also the most honest kind of finding in paleontology. We understand extinct animals largely by mapping them onto living ones, because living animals are the only working models we have. When a fossil refuses to map cleanly onto anything alive, we lose our reference frame. The researchers are effectively saying that Miracinonyx did something we cannot currently picture, because nothing is doing it now. That finding cuts directly at the foundation of the ghost predator idea, because the whole argument depends on Miracinonyx being fast enough to make 55 miles an hour necessary. If this cat was a moderately fast, partly grappling hunter rather than a true sprint specialist, then it is not obvious that it could have driven the pronghorn to such an extreme. It is worth noting the limits of the study as well, in fairness to both sides. The analysis focused on a single specimen, which the authors themselves acknowledge, and a single individual can never settle the question of an entire species. But it is a well-preserved specimen examined with careful comparative method, and its results point clearly in one direction. In science, that is how a consensus gets loosened, not by one decisive blow, but by good evidence accumulating against a comfortable assumption. Then came a second challenge, from the other side of the relationship entirely. A study published recently in the Journal of Mammalogy examined the deep history of the pronghorn family itself, and reported that pronghorns were already fast before the American cheetah ever appeared. This is a serious problem for a simple arms race narrative. The Antilocaprid family goes back roughly 19 million years, and its earliest members already had the long, slender, running-adapted limbs of animals built for open country speed. Miracinonyx does not turn up until around 2.5 million years ago. If the pronghorn lineage was already committed to running long before this cat existed, then the cat cannot be the origin of that commitment. That reframes the whole question in a useful way. Instead of asking which predator made the pronghorn fast, we should probably be asking what kept it fast, and for how long, and under pressure from how many different hunters. North America was not short of predators over those 19 million years. There were dogs, cats, bears, and hyena-like carnivores coming and going across that span, and any of them might have contributed to keeping the Antilocaprids honest. And there is a third problem, which is almost embarrassing in its simplicity. Despite being called the American cheetah for more than a century, and despite the entire hypothesis resting on how fast it could run, nobody appears to have ever produced a reliable estimate of Miracinonyx's actual top speed. Researchers working on the animal today acknowledge this openly. The central number in the whole argument has never been calculated. Once you notice that, the situation looks rather different. An entire popular explanation, repeated in books, documentaries, and classrooms for decades, rests on an assumption about a number that nobody has actually measured. It is a good illustration of how a persuasive image can substitute for data, and how easily a name, in this case American cheetah, can carry an argument that the evidence never quite made. So where does that leave us? Not with a debunking, and it is important to be precise about that. The isotopic work from Natural Trap Caves shows that this cat really did hunt pronghorn. Its skeleton really is built for running to a degree almost unique among cats. Pronghorn really are far faster than anything currently chasing them, and that fact still demands an explanation. What has collapsed is the neat single-cause version. One cat, one prey animal, one arms race, one clean answer. The more probable reality is messier, and to my eye, more interesting. The pronghorn's speed was likely built over many millions of years, by a whole succession of predators, most of which we know only as fragments. Miracinonyx may have been one contributor among several, arriving late to a race that was already well underway, sharpening a capacity that already existed rather than creating it from nothing. Meanwhile, the cat itself is emerging as something stranger than a copy of an African animal, a predator with a hunting style that has no living counterpart, which is precisely the kind of creature that is hardest for us to imagine and most worth trying to. Whatever Miracinonyx was doing out on those plains, no cat alive is doing it now. That may be the most valuable thing this animal has to offer. It is easy to treat extinct species as variations on the familiar, as a bigger version of this or a hairier version of that, because that is how our imagination works. Miracinonyx resists it. Here is a cat that was not a cheetah, not quite a cougar, and not anything currently walking the earth, doing something in the American grasslands that we have no living example of. Whole ways of being an animal have disappeared, and this is one of them. Around 12 to 13,000 years ago, Miracinonyx disappeared. It did not go alone. It vanished as part of the same catastrophic wave that removed the mammoths and mastodons, the ground sloths, the native horses and camels, the saber-toothed cats, the dire wolves, the short-faced bear, and the American lion. In a window of a few thousand years at the close of the Ice Age, North America lost most of its large animals, and the causes are still debated. A rapidly warming and reorganizing climate that dismantled the habitats these animals depended on, and the spread of human hunters across the continent, arriving into an already unstable situation. Most researchers today favor some combination of the two. What is not in dispute is the scale of the loss. Before this event, North America carried a community of large animals comparable to anything on Earth. Multiple kinds of elephant, giant ground sloths, native horses and camels, enormous armored mammals, and a full complement of great predators to match. Afterwards, almost none of it remained. The continent we know, with its deer and coyotes and bears, is not the natural state of this land. It is what was left. For a specialist like Miracinonyx, the vulnerability is easy to see. Its entire body was an investment in one particular kind of world: open, dry grasslands stocked with fast grazing animals. As the climate warmed and those grasslands broke apart and shifted, and as the herds that filled them thinned and vanished, a cat that had given up its ability to climb, to hide, and to grapple in exchange for speed had very little to fall back on. The pronghorn population it depended on was itself collapsing. A predator that has traded everything for one strategy has nowhere to go when that strategy stops working. The cougar, its closest relative, shows the other side of that trade. The cougar kept its climbing, kept its retractable claws, kept its ability to hunt in forest and rock and brush as well as open ground. It kept its options. And the cougar is still here, ranging from Canada to the southern tip of South America, one of the most widely distributed large mammals in the hemisphere. Two cats from the same ancestral stock, one specialized and one flexible, and only one of them made it through the door. But the pronghorn survived. That is the remarkable part, and it deserves attention because almost nothing else of its size and kind made it through. Its family had once contained dozens of species spread across the continent. Every one of them died except Antilocapra americana, which came through the extinction and is still here, running the same country its ancestors ran. Why this one survived when so much else did not is not fully understood. Perhaps its speed genuinely saved it. Perhaps it was flexible enough in its feeding, or simply lucky in where its populations happened to be. Its size may have helped as well. The extinction fell hardest on the very large, on animals that needed enormous ranges, bred slowly and could not absorb losses. A pronghorn is not large. It breeds relatively quickly, eats a range of plants that other grazers avoid, and can survive on ground that will not support anything bigger. In an event that removed the giants, being modest and adaptable turned out to be a considerable advantage. What is certain is that it emerged into a completely transformed world. Every predator that could seriously threaten an adult pronghorn at speed was gone. The arms race it had been running for millions of years simply stopped mid-stride, and the pronghorn was left holding a body optimized for a competition that had no remaining opponents. It has been carrying that body ever since, unchanged in the essentials, because there has been no pressure to change it. The equipment is still there because giving it up would take time, and 12,000 years is not very long. There is another possibility worth mentioning, though, and it complicates the neat picture. Speed may still be doing useful work for the pronghorn even now, just not in the dramatic way we imagine. Escaping predators is only one of its uses. Speed and endurance also allow an animal to cover enormous distances quickly, to move between scattered water and forage, to migrate across hundreds of miles of open country as the seasons turn. Pronghorn do exactly that. It may be that what looks like a leftover weapon is also, quietly, a tool for living in a large and difficult landscape. There is a modern detail here that says something about how deep this goes. Pronghorn evolved on open plains with no barriers, and their answer to obstacles is to go under rather than over. They are poor jumpers. Faced with a fence, a pronghorn will run along it looking for a gap and crawl beneath the bottom wire, and where fences are tight to the ground, herds can be stopped completely. Some pronghorn populations still perform long seasonal migrations across the American West, among the longest land migrations left on the continent, and those routes now run through a landscape of wire. An animal built to outrun a Pleistocene cat can be defeated by a strand of fencing at knee height. There is something almost unbearable about that image, and it says a great deal about the mismatch between an ancient animal and a modern continent. The pronghorn's entire body is a solution to a problem that has ceased to exist, and it is now facing a problem its body has no answer for at all. Millions of years of refinement in open country running counts for nothing against a wire that will not move. Conservation groups across the West now spend real effort on this, modifying fences to raise the bottom wire and opening corridors so that migrating herds can move the way they have always moved. It is a small, practical response to a very old problem, an animal shaped by one continent trying to cross a different one. And it is a rare case where understanding the deep past has an immediate physical use. If you know why a pronghorn runs the way it does, and why it will crawl under a fence rather than clear it, you know how to build a fence it can live with. Its body is still tuned to a world of open grass, and that world is going as well. Which leaves us with the thing itself. Whether or not Miracinonyx was the animal that built the pronghorn's speed, and the honest answer is that we do not know, something did. That speed is real, it is measurable, and it is out of proportion to everything currently alive on this continent. It is evidence, written into a living animal, that North America used to be a far more dangerous place. The pronghorn is a survivor from a lost predator community, still equipped for enemies that no longer exist, and every time it runs it is demonstrating what that vanished world required. That is the part worth carrying away from all of this. The argument over Miracinonyx will continue, and it should. New specimens are coming out of the ground, new methods are being applied, and the picture will keep shifting. But the pronghorn is not in doubt. It is out there this afternoon, on real ground in real time, moving at a speed the modern continent cannot justify. Whatever built that speed is gone. The proof of it is still running. There is more in what we have covered than just old cats and antelope-like animals. The pronghorn makes us think about something. The animals living around us were not shaped only by present-day conditions. Some of them carry features left over from a world of thousands of years ago. If we look carefully at the places we live, we can find the traces of a past hidden in that ground. The pronghorn lying out in a Wyoming field is one of the clearest pieces of evidence for that. The speed we see in this animal today may be a mark left behind by predators that are no longer around. Once, in North America, there were long-legged hunting cats with powerful lungs that could reach speeds close to its own. And the time they lived in is not as distant as we assume. Around 12,000 years ago, the last Miracinonyx disappeared. This predator vanished from the continent long before modern agriculture began. And today people keep driving across the ground where it disappeared without giving it a thought. These cats, which even the first humans may have watched hunting, left their bones under the soil of Wyoming and Montana. And above that soil, the pronghorn is still running today, as if it were still escaping an enemy that no longer exists. Now I want to ask you a question about this. Had you ever heard that a cheetah-like cat once lived in America? And have you ever seen a pronghorn in real life?